Welcome back to another episode of Voices from the Field. Today, we're having a very special guest talking about the mental game, having a good mental approach, and being mentally tough. And I feel like that is something that's always talked about, Carrie. I'm definitely going to ask you about that a little bit because that's what everyone looks for is mental toughness and making sure that your head is, where it needs to be in game stuff. So I'm really excited to dive into that. I think that's something that is really hard to like tangibly talk about and give tangible exercises to build that mental game. So I'm very excited today to hear from our guest how to really build that game up since it's so important. So Carrie, I want you to talk about, mental game and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. I think I just worked with a little team yesterday and was talking about the it factor, and I think for me, maybe that's an old school term, but for me in the coaching realms, the it is the mental side of the game. It's the side of the game that none of us that are old school spent any time doing because you were just expected to suck it up, buttercup, get it done,
Right.
take it care of. We didn't probably know or have the access to how important that is. I still contend that the two biggest muscles in our body, the brain and the eyes, we do the least amount of training with as softball players. And yet it's probably the most important because softball, and I'm terrible at chess. So as soon as I say this to you, like softball is chess. Like you have to be thinking 3 plays ahead of what you're going to do, whether you're coaching or playing, whether you're looking for a certain pitch, if you want to be great. And yet, how much time do we spend talking about that? There's books written like Heads Up Baseball and all those different things. But unless you're a geek or unless you are like have more time, maybe you're retired. I've tried to retire several times, still not, and have all this time to read this. It's kind of like it comes afterwards and not prior. It goes back to my old adage: if I could have coached before I played, no one would have touched me because you have to start analyzing the game. We're so into it. And athletes tend to be visual. Athletes tend to be show me and I can do it. So you can't show them the brain. That's something they have to kind of learn. So I think the mental side, and I think we spent quite a bit of time on it with different people, but I think it's really important for us to access so many because you're always just looking for that extra little nugget or what works, because what works for Katie isn't going to work for Carrie. What works for Carrie isn't necessarily going to work for Jaden or Bonnie or Allie or who it is. There's so much different things, but there's a lot of scientific research, kind of like what we did with You Hit Softball. I mean, that's all brain stuff. And so I'm really excited about our guest. He's coming on. I'm not going to say who he is till we introduce him. I asked him for like, what questions would you like to discuss today to kind of give myself an idea? Because I tend to go to the same ones when you talk to somebody about mental training. You read this gentleman's biography and bio, and you kind of go, holy smokes, like this guy's got a lot because he's got so many boxes checked that I've never had or other people, but I think it's going to transfer into what we're doing in athletics. And he really does it with youth, adults, everybody. So I'm super excited. He's got apps, he's got lots of different things, but I think one of the things that hit me is he said, one of the questions he'd like to talk are, what are some of the mental muscles you train? So we've talked about mental training, but what are the mental muscles? And when he said that, I'm like, oh, there's different ones. It's not just one. So I'm really excited to hear about that. So I think you should stay tuned and check him out. Hello, Extra Innings Softball Voices from the Field. Super excited to get started with our guest today. Honored that he said yes to us. It is Dr. Jim Taylor, and I am going to shamelessly read his bio because I tried for about 20 minutes to kind of get it organized in my head like I was just talking to you, and it's nearly impossible. So Dr. Jim Taylor holds a PhD in psychology and has worked junior elite, age group, Olympic, professional athletes in all sports. Jim is the author, get a load of this, of 18 books, including Train Your Mind for Athletic Success. And that's been translated into 10 languages, and an editor of 5 textbooks. He's got blogs that are read by over 10 million people. And he has given more than 1,000 workshops throughout North, South America, Europe, Asia, and Middle East. I'm not done. Hold on. He is also the co-founder of Chief and chief officer for Mind2, and it's a startup that's developing an app to support athletic performance, well-being, and mental health. So super excited at that, kind of meeting the athletes where they are today on technology. Okay, now let's talk about what he does in his spare time. He's a former world-ranked alpine ski racer in his youth. He has a second degree as a black belt in karate. This is the one that I just as a softball player go, holy cow. He's a sub 3-hour marathoner, an Ironman athlete, a 2-time age group national champion, and 3-time world championship medal triathlete. So with that alone, I'm not even sure what we need to talk about other than tell us how you do it all. Dr. Taylor, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me to Extra Innings Softball, Carrie and Katie. I'm looking forward to just having a nice conversation and sharing with you a little bit about what I do, my perspective on sports psychology and mental training, and why every young softball player should be doing mental training if they want to become the best softball players they can be.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So obviously you are extremely mentally tough. I mean, I'm hearing the marathons, I'm hearing the triathlons, the Ironman. So I'm really, really excited to hear your expertise. And anyone watching, don't run. I cannot run, but anyone that can run a marathon under 3 hours and do the Ironman, they got to be really, really strong in the mind. So I'm very excited to hear our conversation.
I appreciate that. One of the challenges of what I do for a living is that I have to practice what I preach. And I'm also sort of my first guinea pig in terms of trying out different things. So I try to live what I support athletes trying to do in my work.
I guess, Dr. Taylor, what I would like to do is start with the generic question, because when you hear of mental health and mental training and all the different stuff that's out there, it's kind of like the coin phrase that everybody throws around. Tell me, what is mental training?
Yeah. So one of the great challenges of my work of mental training, of dealing with the mind and training the mind, is that it's not tangible. So let's think about the physical side of softball. If I want to see how strong some of the girls are, we go into the gym. You can put these plates in the bar. You can see how much they lift. Out on the field, you can see technically how they play, how they throw, how they hit, and so on. So the physical side, it's very tangible. You can see it, you can measure it, you can touch it. So it's easy for young softball players to wrap their arms around this idea that if I lift weights, I'm going to get stronger. If I go in the batting cage, I'm going to become a better hitter. But the mental side, it's like grasping onto fog. Because everybody says the mind is so important, and yet how much time is devoted to training the mind? Little to none. And I challenge young athletes that I work with and say, like, how many hours a week do you spend on your physical or sport training? And it's anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week with practice and so on. So and I then ask the question, how important is the mind to softball success? And is it less, as, or more important? And very few say it's less important. Realistically, most say it's as important, but a large number say it's more important. But then I say, okay, if that's the case, are you spending 10 to 20 hours a week on your mental training? And it's meant to be a rhetorical question. Of course they're not. And I don't expect them to. But given its importance, shouldn't be time devoted to it. Because the reality is, Katie and Carrie, softball players do what I call mental stuff, meaning they do things to motivate themselves. They try to be positive. They try to relax when they're going to be up to bat. They try to stay focused. They try to control their emotions. But that's not mental training. Mental stuff is like going to the gym every 3 weeks and doing arm curls. That's not physical training. And so the way I put it is that I want softball players to think about mental training the same way they approach their physical training, their sport training. So think about what makes a conditioning program so effective. First of all, it's comprehensive. It doesn't just work on your arms or your legs or your endurance or your strength. Anything related to performance, physical performance, it trains. So it's comprehensive. It's also structured. Softball players just don't go into the gym or onto the field and do whatever. They're on a program that their coaches give them that maximizes the benefits for them to improve as quickly as they can. So it's structured. Third, it's consistent. Serious softball players just don't go out and play or go into the gym every couple of weeks. They do it almost every day. And of course, effort needs to be put into it. Because you can have the best sport, the best softball training program, the best conditioning program, but if you don't put in the effort, not going to have a lot of benefits. So that's a really important way to think about it. The challenge, though, is again, because the mind is intangible. You can't see confidence. You can't see intensity. You can't see focus. So how can we make it tangible? And I do it in a couple of ways. Well, one thing I want to mention is that a difficult aspect about talking about the mind is most people, much less young athletes, they don't have vocabulary. And you can't talk about something if you don't have the words to describe it. And so a big part of what I do is to give them that vocabulary. And so this idea about mental training being something you train. So I use the phrase mental training very deliberately because, of course, softball players can understand training. They can understand practice. So it's mental training. I also talk about how the mind is made up of muscles. And just like physical muscles, mental muscles can be weak, they can be strong, and they can be injured. But they need to be exercised in order to get stronger. And of course, athletes, softball players understand muscles and the idea about how to strengthen them. Another thing I talk about is helping softball players develop what I call a mental toolkit. So I'm going to use a driving metaphor here. You're out for a drive and you get a flat tire. You pull over and you don't have a spare, a jack, or a tire iron. And those are three things you need to fix a flat tire if you happen not to know how to change a flat tire. And if you don't have those or you don't know how to use them, you're stuck. You're calling AAA. But maybe you're in a place where there's no cell service. You're stuck. But if you have those tools and you know how to fix a flat tire, you can fix the flat tire and get on your way. Now, this is not automotive maintenance class. This is a metaphor. So softball and life are full of flat tires. And so it's not a matter whether players have them, it's they have the tools to fix them. So let's say a big game, a big tournament, players going up to bat, and they're down by a run, and there's two players on first and second. So kind of a big situation. What areas can happen? Oh my gosh, what if I strike out? Negative talk, or really nervous, like there's a lot of pressure on me. I need to get a hit. Well, ordinarily that's going to make it very likely that they're going to strike out or not get a hit. But if they have the tools to be more positive, the tools to relax, the tools to focus, then they can fix that flat tire of that situation and give themselves a better chance of becoming successful.
So when you're saying that to me, the first thing I think about is how this applies across life. It's not just softball. You're talking in the classroom. You're talking about being a better daughter, being a better parent, being a better coach in this. Why do you think it's so rarely trained? Like, why have we not spent more time on this? Why I feel like we're farther behind than a lot of different countries, because I think a lot of different countries spend a lot more time on it, being with the traveling that I've done with softball in it. Why is it so rarely used when, in my opinion, because I've done a lot of this different stuff, it affects not just what you're doing in a sport, it affects the quality of your life.
Right. Great insight and great question, Carrie. So first of all, everything I do, it's not softball psychology or sports psychology, it's life. And you're absolutely right that everything I talk about can be applied, of course, to softball, to other sports, to school, to career, everything. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because as I'll talk about shortly, I'm just not concerned about softball performance. Because softball players, if they're lucky, they're going to play, into maybe their 30s if they're at the highest level, but they're going to be people all their lives. And so that's really important. So your question about why isn't this done more formally? A couple of reasons. First of all, it's not tangible. And the mind is sort of a scary thing because we don't know it. We don't understand it. Muscles, I get. Speed, hitting, technique, video. We all get that. You can wrap your arms around it. But the mental side, again, is tricky because it's like, yeah, we know it's important, but like what aspect of it? So part of it is just unfamiliarity, not having a vocabulary, not having a part of the culture. So yes, you do see in other countries and in some other sports where they're taking it to a level where there's sort of formal mental training. And I'm being redundant because if you're doing mental training, it is formal because you're on a program of some sort. But a lot of it's just not part of the culture where it's like, it's just not something they think about. And that young players will figure it out, I suppose. But a lot don't. And we lose a lot of athletes in a lot of sports because they don't figure out the mental side. So it's no longer fun. They're no longer motivated. They're struggling. They're frustrated. They don't know what to do. And so, one of my missions in my career has been to get people to realize that this is mental training and an essential part of your sports efforts and ultimately your sports success. Because at the highest level, at the Olympic level, they're all genetic freaks. They're all amazing athletes. They've all been doing it for decades. They're all in incredible physical condition. They're all technically and tactically sound. They know the game. So on game day, or whoever's going up to bat, that's mental. And that's what it's all about. And whether you're a 10-year-old in a local tournament or you're on the world stage, it doesn't matter. You're trying to be the best you can. And ultimately what enables you to be the best you can is what you do up here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I have one more question, then I'll let Katie go. So when I hear you talk about, I just listened to everything you said. I looked at the questions that we were talking about prior, and we keep saying the brain, and we keep talking about lifting arms, legs, bats, whatever that part of your body is. There's something in one of the questions that you said is like, what are some of the mental muscles of your brain? Like we talk about it, the brain's a big thing. So is my body. So I have leg days. If I'm a softball athlete, I got leg days, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and arms are Tuesday, Thursday. What are the different muscles of the brain that you're talking about in training?
Yes, outstanding. So this is, again, a way to make things more tangible and more concrete and more sense of like, oh yeah, I get that. So there are 5 mental muscles that I focus on most. Motivation. It's the foundation of everything, because if you don't want to get up and do the work, nothing else matters. Second is confidence. And this is for me the most important mental muscle game day, because you might have all the ability in the world to make good contact and get hits. But if you don't believe in that ability, you're not going to fully commit. So you have to believe in yourself. The third is intensity. Now let me explain what I mean by that. A lot of people think of intensity as mental intensity, like super serious. Not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this range of physiological activation, where let's do a 1 to 15. A 1 is asleep, where you're just like super relaxed. And then a 10 is really fired up. And that 1 to 10 range I call helpful intensity. So somewhere between 1 and 10, every softball player plays their best. But some, they go up to bat super relaxed. Others kind of medium fired up, and others really, really amped. And it's a very personal thing. But if you're not at that ideal level of physical intensity, you're not going to play well, because ultimately we are physiological beings. So if we're too relaxed or too fired up, our body can't function. Softball is an amazing sport because you can succeed a third of the time and you're a superstar. Can you imagine that? And same in baseball, of course, but can you imagine being a brain surgeon and only succeeding 1 out of 3 times? Or a construction company where they only need to make sure that 1 building out of 3 stays up, doesn't collapse. Softball's a crazy sport in that way. Anyway, so the idea then is that you need to get to that ideal level of intensity. But as you will know, there's that 11 to 15 range of physical intensity, and that's anxiety, that's nervousness, that's bad nerves. And so if you're up in that range and you're going up to bat, basically game over. You're done, because you cannot possibly hit the ball effectively if you're like this, a knot. Because as you well know, the way you make good contact is to control the bat. And if you're shaking, you're not going to have good bat control. And the way to generate bat speed is with having all the different parts of your body linked together to ultimately, from the feet to the hips, to the torso, to the shoulders, to the arms, to the wrists, to the bat. That's how you generate bat speed. And if you're tense, you can't do that. So far we have motivation, confidence, intensity. The fourth is focus. You get up to go to bat. The crowd's going crazy. Your coach is yelling. Everybody's cheering. And what do you need to focus on? The pitcher and the ball. And yet there's so many things that can get in the way of that focus. There's a great scene from For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, where he's pitching and everything, when he's about to pitch, everything blurs out. And that's how you have to be in softball.
I think he calls that clear the mechanism.
Okay, clearly you have a better memory of the movie than I do, but it's a wonderful sports psychology movie. Obviously, the same thing applies for baseball, whether it's pitching or hitting. There's all this stuff going on around you, but it has to all just come in here. And this, like you, the pitcher, and the ball. And so focus is essential. And the last is emotions. And this is a huge one. Because think of all the range of emotions you can experience in a big game. Fear, anxiety, excitement, joy, pride, inspiration, anger, frustration, disappointment. And so, let's say you strike out 2 times and you're coming up to bat and you've got a chance to knock in a player, one of your teammates, and you're thinking about those last at-bats, those last strikeouts, and what kind of emotions you're feeling. None that are going to help. So those are the mental muscles that need to be trained. Motivation, confidence, intensity, focus, and emotions. And there are some other ones, but those are the big ones. Now, then how do you train them? And so I talked about having this mental toolkit. So that's for game day. In training, in practice, those tools start out as exercises. So just like going into the gym, you exercise different parts of the body that you talked about, legs, core, upper body. Same thing with the mind. And with mental training, there are certain exercises you do. And there are a handful of exercises that I believe are most essential. First, goal setting. Goal setting is like Waze or Google Maps. You can't know what where to go until you know where you know how to get, where you want to go. And then you have a roadmap of how to get there. So goals establish that. This is what I want to accomplish. I want to start this year. I want to hit a certain percentage. I want to get a certain number of strikeouts if I'm a pitcher, things like that. And then process goals. What do I need to do to achieve those outcome goals? I need to get time in the cage. I need to practice my fielding, whatever it might be. So goal setting is really important because it provides a destination, a direction, and a plan. Imagery, visualization. Same thing, mental imagery, visualization. I like to use the word imagery, but if you use the word visualization, that's fine. Basically, that involves seeing and feeling yourself performing the way you want. The most powerful mental exercise, mental tool. And there's an incredible amount of research that shows that when you combine imagery with actual practice, you get better faster. And that one way to prepare for a big tournament is to imagine yourself playing in that tournament. What you're doing then is you're programming your mind to think and feel and perform in ways that will help you. And so again, you're training your mind. So when the tournament comes, when the game comes, when the at-bat comes, then you've already trained your mind about how you're going to think, feel, and perform. So imagery is huge. Routines. Now, baseball is a sport. Softball is a sport of routines. Whether it's on deck circle, in the batter's box, with all the little ticks and habits and things that players do, and all those things are really powerful because they create familiarity, they create comfort, and they create confidence. Because if I do these things, I know I will be prepared. And ultimately, all you can do when you get ready to throw a pitch, when you get ready in the batter's box, is to be able to say, I'm as prepared as I can be. Now, that doesn't always work out, of course, with softball, but it's your only chance. Because if you go up not prepared, zero chance.
I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that our 10 and 12U coach nomination form will close May 31st. So make sure that if you have a 10 or 12U coach right now that you want to honor and spotlight and highlight and just give them the recognition that they deserve, make sure to go to our website, xtrainingsoftball.com, and nominate your 10 and 12U coach today. Again, nominations close May 31st. So make sure you get those in before the deadline, and we cannot wait to highlight your coach. Now back to the episode.
Absolutely. And when I hear you saying that, like, the old school coach in me, in hearing what you're saying, how do you feel like muscle memory plays into mental training? Because you know what I mean? Like, I think about all the things that you're talking about, and I go back to when I first started playing basketball and we won a state championship in high school. And I guarantee you my coach knew nothing about mental training other than suck it up, buttercup, run more, do things like that. But I can remember like so vividly, and I've used it in everything I've ever coached with every athlete I've ever done. And it to me is so mental training when he said, I don't care how you do your free throws, but you do it the same way every time. Like he literally said, I don't care if you bounce the ball 3 times, pick your nose, adjust your shorts and shoot, but then you're going to do that every time. And we spent hours and hours and hours of practice on it, of what our routine was. And he gave us the freedom to make it however we wanted it. And I can vividly remember this is like literally being on the state championship in the game and it coming down to like 3 seconds and I'm on the foul line for a free throw. And I've got 2 shots and I only need to make 1 for us to win. And I can so vividly remember at first, the first thought that came into my mind, I'm like, look, I'm the ball handler. I'm not the shooter. Why'd you pick me, God? Was the first thing that I thought. And then the second thing, I shot the first one and I tanked it. Like it wasn't even close. It was a brick. Like I'm shocked that there's even a backboard still there. And I can so vividly hear him to this day say, do your routine. And instantaneously, it like shocked me. I can't even remember what my routine was, but I did it. Never even thought about it. And it went right through the net. And we end up winning the championship. And I'm thinking all those hours that we thought he was so stupid to make us sit there and practice our routine. And yet he'd be a richer man if he knew back then what he was doing to us as players. Because when I say a long time ago, I'm talking 86. So this was way before mental training and anything that we were doing in athletics. But that's to me, like I'm hearing you talk and the people that we interview and talk to, I'm like, it starts playing off to her. I'm like, we've been doing this a long time. We just didn't know what we were doing. And we really were stumbling in it.
Right, for sure. And it's something that over time, if you stay committed to softball, you will figure it out to some degree, but sometimes it's too late. And so this is just like conditioning. You don't wait till you're 18 to start lifting weights. You start when you're 13 or 12. Same with mental training, because that prevents a lot of problems from occurring. So a couple other mental exercises is self-talk. Incredibly powerful tool because, well, let's put it this way. Self-talk is incredibly powerful. The problem is it can be a weapon or a tool. So if your self-talk is like, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm going to strike out. This gal's throwing smoke. It's not going to happen. You're done. So being able to believe in yourself and be positive, I got this, I can do this. And so self-talk, again, is another really important one. And the last one is actually a physical thing, but it's also a mental thing. That's breathing. Because when you get really nervous, what happens to your breathing? It's like you hold your breath. That doesn't work well. So simply breathing has psychological, emotional, and physiological effects that are really, really important. You feel more in control if you're breathing. Your emotions are going to be better, and your body's going to get more relaxed. So there are an innumerable number of exercises that I use with athletes, but those are sort of the 5 ones that I think are most important. So I want to make a little transition now. 2 paths of my work. The one is what I've been describing is mental training. The other stuff has to do with what I call attitudes. And it's really attitudes, beliefs, actions, and emotions tie in too. So I work with a lot of athletes who have pretty good mental muscles, pretty good mental toolkit, but they approach their sport in such a way that they basically lost before they even get in the game. And that's a function of the attitudes they hold. So some of the most common attitudes that I find are most unhealthy are what I call overinvestment, where like you care too much. Of course you want to care about your softball. You want it to be important to you, but if you care too much, if it's too important to you, then basically you are creating a life or death situation. And I don't mean physical life or death. Not that many girls die playing softball, but psychological life or death, where it's like, oh my gosh, if I don't get a hit now, my friends won't like me, my parents won't love me, I'll be hugely embarrassed, and I'll be a total failure the rest of my life. And so you want to care about softball for sure, but not too much. Perfectionism. Softball and perfectionism don't play well together, because softball is a sport where perfection is an impossibility. Yes, there are occasionally the perfect games, but even the perfect games aren't perfect. Where I don't know that much about softball history and stats, but has anybody ever thrown a truly perfect game, meaning every ball was a strike? I don't think so.
Probably not.
No.
And if they did, no one knows about it. It was in their dreams.
Right. And perfectionism, unfortunately, if you go into social media, especially these days, everybody's perfect. Everybody looks perfect and talks perfect, and everybody's happy. Not a healthy way to go through life. Fear of failure. Epidemic in our culture, probably the number one reason why parents send their kids to me. Now, they don't know that's why they're sending their kids to me. They're sending their kids to me because their kids are stuck. They play well in practice, but they can't play well in games. But underlying that is a fear of failure. And we live in a culture where it used to be like, if you got a B, that was fine in school. But now anything less than an A, I work with kids where it's like an A minus, OMG, massive failure. Crazy, I know. So fear of failure. Another unhealthy attitude is a preoccupation with results, like worrying about number of hits. Are we going to win? And it's an interesting one because a lot of people think that, well, if the goal is to win, then we have to focus on winning. But when you focus on winning, 2 problems with that. First of all, when does the outcome of a softball game occur? At the end of the game. And so if you're focused on the end of the game, the winning, what are you not focused on? The start of the game to the finish, during which you have to actually perform. Also, what makes players nervous? Is it the process or the potential outcome of going to the plate?
Always the outcome.
Yeah.
Always the outcome, exactly. Right. And then the final attitude that I find unhealthy is what I call expectations and pressure. I have to go 4 for 5 today. I better get 10 strikeouts. Softball and life doesn't work that way. Basically, when you create an expectation, there's always an implicit threat to it. So I have to go 4 for 5 today, or else my parents won't love me, my friends won't like me, I'll be a total failure, I'll let the town down, I will embarrass myself. Here's a metaphor I use, and this is another attempt to make the intangible aspects of the mind tangible. Imagine you have a player going to the plate to hit, and somebody forces them to put on a 30-pound weight vest. And I don't know if you know what weight vests are, but they're basically vests they're used for training that have little cylinders of weight in them that you can adjust them. Anyway, imagine that player putting that weight vest on. How are they going to feel? Heavy, weighed down.
Heavy.
How are they going to be able to move? Not well. That run to first base, going to be slow. So a lot of the work I do is about taking that weight vest off. Because again, it's a metaphor. That weight vest is all these attitudes, perceptions, and beliefs that weigh them down.
Yeah.
Because the goal is when they go up for their at bat, they're free, they're light, and whatever they have that day, they can give it everything they've got. And that doesn't mean, of course, that they're going to get a hit or they're going to win the game, but it gives them a chance.
Okay, guys, we are in a new month, the month of May, and we have a new theme for the month, which means we have new polls as well. So our theme for this month of May is leaving your legacy. We always talk about empowering, inspiring, and supporting our softball community, and there's no better way to do that than leaving a legacy and really thinking about how you want to leave your mark on the softball world. So for our polls this month, we have questions all about leaving your legacy. We have questions about what defines a coach's legacy in the minds of players? What's the hardest part of building a legacy that lasts? And what truly defines a legacy you leave behind? So a lot of questions about this topic. We're so excited to hear your guys' answers. I think that it is so important to think about leaving your legacy when you are in the thick of season, especially right now. There's a lot of playoffs going on, a lot of people ramping up for summer ball. And I think it's really important to sit and reflect and make sure that you're in it and you're being intentional about everything that you do. So head on over to our website, extrainningsoftball.com, click on the polls tab, and go let us know about leaving your legacy and what you think about it. I'm thinking like as myself, like as an athlete, I feel like a lot of the time what I was telling myself, or I'm sure people that are listening can relate, you don't even realize, like you don't even have the awareness of I can't even control what I'm thinking because it's a subconscious thing that's probably happened year after year after year after year. So how do you recommend like building that awareness, not only for self-talk and your expectations and the attitudes that you're talking about, but even you mentioned with the muscles of focus and your intensity level, what you perform at best, all of those things. How do you recommend these players find that awareness to, first of all, even pinpoint, what makes them great and what's not making them great, and then even be able to apply those routines and those structured exercises that you recommend to be able to kind of fix those problems?
Yeah. A phenomenal question for sure, and very common and a real challenge. And awareness is the start. Because as you suggest, nobody chooses to be negative. Nobody chooses to get nervous. Nobody chooses to be distracted. But we have this part of our brain, of our mind, the unconscious. And our unconscious is a part of our thing that we have no awareness of, and yet has a profound impact on how it affects. And so the first step is that awareness. And it's really just sort of having the metaphor I use is having your radar on. And so you're going up to for an at bat, and you're negative. Or sometimes it's hard to do in the moment. So after you reflect back and you go, oh my gosh, I was saying to myself, I'm going to strike out. Or I couldn't believe how nervous I was, or how tight my muscles were. So there's no magic tech to this so much as just having that radar on, being aware. And sometimes, again, it has to be reflecting back. Right. Because in the moment it's tough. But the more you reflect back, the more you increase your ability. In a way, awareness is a muscle too. And so if you can exercise that muscle of awareness, it will get stronger and it will work better. So what'll start to happen is you're walking to the batter's box and from the on deck circle, and you're starting to think, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well. She's throwing heat. And then you go, wait a minute, I'm being negative here. Now, in that moment, you probably can't turn it around, but that's the first step. Mm-hmm. So as you suggest, this all has to start in practice. So let's say you walk in the batter's box for practice hitting, and you start to say, okay, I've got this. I'm gonna do my best to get a hit. So you start practicing the positive self-talk. You also include breathing. So basically, think of it this way. Would you ever change your batting technique in the middle of a game?
Probably not.
Of course not, because it's not in your muscle memory and it wouldn't work. Same thing with mental stuff. Whatever you want to do in a game, you want to practice in practice. And so you start building routines. You start using breathing. You start using self-talk. You start using keywords things to focus on in practice, because it's about reps, just like in the gym. Just like in the batter's box, you take a lot of cuts in the cage. In batting practice, you do a lot of reps in the gym lifting weights. What does all that stuff do? It builds physical strength and muscle memory. So in the game, they get in the batter's box and they don't have to think about keeping their elbow up or striding toward the pitcher's mound. It just happens because you've done it thousands upon thousands of times in practice and so on. So that's the approach you have to take. Again, it's training. It's not magic. You wouldn't believe the number of calls I get before a major tournament, 2 weeks before a major tournament.
It's me.
Can you get my kid ready? That's like going to a conditioning coach and saying, can you get my kid strong in 2 weeks? Of course not. I don't have magic dust. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I'm not a magician. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes work.
Well, let me ask you this, because there's a couple things that I think about is the little that I know about the brain is the brain gets formed based on all of our experiences. It's just when you're a baby, it's just fresh and it's grabbing all these things out there to say, hey, this feels good. Hey, this feels good. Hey, this worked. Hey, this doesn't. Not necessarily all the right programs running in the computer. It's just from our experiences, like Katie said. And one of the things that I've known, even if I'm just talking from a personal standpoint or even working with athletes, is once our brain has these programs and they're running, they subconsciously just start running and we don't even make conscious thoughts on it. It just happens around us. So we come and we say, okay, I'm going to mentally train, and we start to practice those things. The one thing that I'd love to hear you comment on, because what I have seen is the brain wants to keep us safe, and the brain thinks it's keeping us safe based on what our past experience is that says, hey, this feels comfortable. This feels right. Even if it's poor self-talk or whatever it is, this is what's worked. So once we start practicing those mental things, I like to kind of refer to it as the transformation station time. Like when you're going through transformation, you are going to probably have some bigger failures than not, because your brain's going, stop doing that. That's not the way we do things. You got to come back. Like, this feels good. And so, you're fighting, to me, a bigger, stronger muscle than you are when I'm lifting my legs or my arms, because I'm looking at that and I'm feeling it. I'm not necessarily doing it. So I'm not subconsciously bench pressing. I'm bench pressing. So when you're doing those transformations, and it's going to take a star to fail, a star to fail, a star to fail, until you get to where, hey, I've transformed the way I think, therefore I'm seeing the success. And I think about it. I was just literally listening to you talk and thinking about, I was working with 10-year-olds yesterday, and parents screaming on the outside, coach saying one thing. I'm working with 10 little kids that I just looked at them and started laughing, and I brought them in. I'm like, isn't it amazing how many people want a piece of you? Like your mama wants a piece of you. Your daddy does. I do. Your coaches, your teacher, your friends, your brothers. Like, do you ever just go, and they all start laughing? I'm like, you're doing that right now, and I'm trying to get you 1% better in softball. Can you plug in for me for 10 minutes, and then we'll go have a treat? And it was like instantaneously, they did great. And the parents are like, what'd you say? I said, I told them to quit listening to you because you're screaming at them. And they kind of looked at me, and I was like, so the next time I come to work, we're going to call it silent practice for the parents. You're going to practice being silent, just watching and listening, because you thought they just did really well. And they said, yeah. And I said, oh, so now you've got to practice, because you're paying me an obscene amount of money to come do this for them. And yet, really what I needed to do is get you to practice being a better parent, so your kid that you're paying this money for can transform where they're at. So I think that's the thing that I believe. I'd love to hear your thought of what it does take to transform the brain, because you are transforming the brain. You're talking about the practicing, and, practice makes perfect. But by the time you start working with people, they've probably had 10 plus years of running a certain program, and there might be a glitch in there, but we've learned how to cover it up and go. And as you start doing what you're talking about, you start kind of peeling away the onion layers to get to the nut of it.
Yeah. So very deep question. First of all, I don't like the phrase practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent. Because if you practice bad stuff, you're going to get really good at bad stuff.
Yeah.
As far as the parents go, I think that's a whole nother podcast, because I have written a book on how to be a good sport parent, but because I can just totally go off in that direction. And for me, the best kind of sport parents at practice are seen and not heard, and often not even seen. Anyway, totally different topic. We'll save that for another podcast perhaps. But yes, change is hard. The self-help industry broadly is like a $13 billion industry. Why? Because nobody's figured it out, and a lot of people are promising quick fixes. So change is hard, but being the best softball player you can be is also hard. Getting stronger in the gym, does it hurt? Is it always feel good? No, it hurts. Can you sometimes not put the weight up you're trying to squat? Absolutely. There are failures. So the best predictor of who changes is simply who stays with it the longest. And because you're right, those unconscious forces are really good at what they do. Being negative, getting nervous, being distracted. But we have this thing up here called the prefrontal cortex. It's part of our evolved brain. And the prefrontal cortex is a big thing in school these days. It's involved with what's called executive functioning. And it's what enables people to weigh risks and rewards, short-term and long-term consequences. But ultimately, it's about being able to make choices. And so this is what happens is it's your conscious mind, your prefrontal cortex, has to override your unconscious forces. So here's another metaphor, again, in the name of making things tangible. I use this all the time in my work. fork in the road. We can all appreciate forks in the road. We're driving down the road and we take off a right fork or a left, or we get off an exit or something like that. One fork, in our case, is the bad road. Being negative, being unmotivated, being nervous, worrying about what other people think of us. Nobody chooses to go down the bad road. But as you suggest, through repetition and through early experiences, what I call contaminated fuel, home of the conversation, people go down the bad road. And they're going to stay on that bad road until they are aware that they're on the bad road and until they recognize that there's actually a good road. So the bad road, simple. And here's the way I think about it. Taking the good road is a simple but not easy choice. It's simple because would you rather go down the bad road or the good road? Duh. Of course you don't want to go down the bad road. But it's not easy because, like we talked about, past history, contaminated fuel, bad mental habits, just repetition of bad mental technique, if you will, gets ingrained, and that unconsciously takes us down the bad road. So we need to, at first, going back to awareness, recognize, oh my gosh, I'm starting to go down the bad road here. Like walking toward the plate. Oh my gosh, I don't think I can get a hit off her. Wait a minute, bad road. I'm going to give it everything I've got. I'm going to focus on good, clean swings. But sometimes it's only after the fact. Oh my gosh, that was the bad road. And I didn't even think of the good road. But at some point, you're gonna get to this place here where you're in the on-deck circle and you are starting to go down the bad road. And you say, wait a minute, let's breathe. Some positive talk here. I got this. So you're recognizing the fork in the road. But you can't take the fork in the road until you identify the good road. And so you can't just think, okay, I got to take the good road. Well, what does that mean? In practice, you practice recognizing what is the good road. Being positive, being motivated, being focused, being calm. And you practice taking the good road over and over and over again, even though you might not be necessarily going down the bad road at that moment, because in practice you often aren't, but you're practicing going down the good road. So when you get to the game and you're in the on-deck circle and you start to go down the bad road, you say, uh-oh, here we go, fork in the road. Good road is this, this, and that. So you do that. And the great thing about the good road is it's self-reinforcing. Because do you know why they call it the good road? Well, because it's good. You feel good and you do good. That's bad English, you do well. And so we generally like to repeat that which works.
Yeah.
And so every time you go down the go down the good road, it gets easier to go down the good road.
Right.
Until finally the bad road, it's overgrown and gets weeded and it's not there anymore. So then there's no fork in the road. It's like you don't call it the good road anymore, it's just the road.
It's the road.
But life, softball and life are full of forks in the road. So you got this one overgrown and weeded over. There'll be another bad road ahead and another and another and another. It's not just this particular situation that you learn to recognize when you're on the bad road and take the good road. It's a skill, if you will. So the next time, anytime you go down any kind of bad road, you go, oh yeah, this is the bad road. Because we all know the bad road. It feels bad and we do bad. We do not want to continue to go down that bad road. But most young athletes, most people don't know how to get off that.
Right.
And this is one way to think about it.
Well, as we're getting ready to kind of wrap up, I think I could sit and talk about this forever because to me, I feel like I've done softball for so long. It's hard for me to always think of new things of how to teach certain skills, but the mental side of it is always cool. I'd love just to give you a little shameless time to tell us what is Mind 2 and how people can find it. Obviously, we're also starting at Extra Innings Softball, kind of a book club. We haven't gotten it started yet, so I would love to get a list of your books. So I'll put that out that if you can send that to me, because one of the things that you said was one for being a parent of a sport athlete, and we are starting a parent hub and all those different things. Like we're trying to be more inclusive and not just about the player. We want to talk to the parents because we realize that that's their support system, and the amount of education or resources and to find it isn't always accessible. So we'd love to do that. But if you want to take a minute or two just to tell us what Mind 2 is and where they can find it, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So let me back up for a second. I have sort of two career paths right now. One is in my consulting practice where I work directly with athletes, give talks to programs, and so on. And for people who want to learn about that, they can go to my website, drjimtaylor.com, drjimtaylor.com. I'm also on Facebook and X and Instagram and LinkedIn if you want to follow me. I publish a lot of stuff on there. If you go to my website, probably 95% of everything I've ever written is on there for free. I have a blog, a sport blog, and a parenting blog with just hundreds upon hundreds of articles that people can access for nothing. In terms of books, I think the two books that I would recommend, the first is for athletes in terms of performance, and that's called Train Your Mind for Athletic Success. Train Your Mind for Athletic Success. It's on Amazon. And then the parenting book is called Raising Young Athletes. And it's basically how you become the best parent you can be to raise the best athletes and kids you can be.
Love that.
That's one path in my work. The other path is a startup that I've co-founded, and it's called Mind To, as in put your mind to. And we are developing an app, the goal of which to empower athlete performance, well-being, and mental health. And we'll be launching the app this summer. We'll be launching the website, which is mind2.io. In the next couple of weeks. And what the way this idea of this company, this startup came about was that there is such a need for educating athletes about the mental side of sport and life. But the reality is like, hour-long classes and lectures and things like that, that's just not where kids are these days. And a fundamental goal of Mind To is to meet athletes where they are in this digital age. And that means on their phones, on the go, and very often short attention spans. And so what we're creating are tools in which athletes can, in a very short time, learn some really useful information and some practical tools they can use. And so just be on the lookout for mind2.io is the website. It's not up yet. And then Mind To, the app, will be out this summer. And hopefully we'll be able to reach out to a lot of different people and help programs as well as individual athletes, because programs, but a softball program, you often can't afford bringing a sports psychologist or a mental coach in, or there's just not any time for it. So Mind To is a way to provide them with a lot of information that they can help them play their best, and then help the clubs provide that information in a way that's digestible and engaging and useful.
That's fantastic. I love everything. Thank you so much for your time. What a blessing to spend this time in the morning with you. And I'd like to thank you.
You're very welcome, Carrie and Katie. Yes. Great questions. Love chatting up with people who are passionate about what I'm passionate about, which is helping young athletes become the best athletes and the best people they can be. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode with Dr. Taylor. I learned so much. I feel like I say that every single week, but I learned so much about the mental game. And I really loved, my favorite part was about the different muscles that you have in the mental game, and just like knowing what intensity level you play at best, the attitudes that you have, and just being aware of your mind and how it really can affect the way that you play the game and the way that you see the game. So I loved it. I hope you guys could take something from it. I think that this is a great way to wrap up our parent playbook that we had in the month of April. And I think it's just really great for not only parents, but coaches and players as well, to learn more about the mental game, how you can exercise the different parts of your mental game, and being able to really go out there and do your best and do as best as you can with the tools that you have, which the big tool is in your head. So very, very excited about this episode. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. I want to make sure you guys know that our nominations for our 10 and 12U coach rankings will be finishing up May 31st. So make sure you get a nomination in if you have a 10 or 12U coach that you want to honor. Our 2027 rankings are being rolled out right now. So if you did nominate a 2027 player, those rankings are coming out as we speak. So make sure you tune in on our social media pages as well as our website to make sure you don't miss your players' rankings. And our polls for this month are out. I know I talked about those earlier. Make sure you go vote. I'm so excited to see all your guys' different opinions about leaving your legacy, leaving your mark, and how it really can be so important in the way that you play the game and the way that you are intentional about what you're doing, how you play the game, and who you're around. So again, thank you guys so much for watching this week's episode. We are bringing a really cool guest on next week, so I can't wait for you guys to listen. And make sure you follow all of our social media pages. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as our Spotify account to make sure you stay up to date on all of our podcast episodes. So hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you guys next week.